But my name for hell is... It's very interesting because, like, you and I were talking about this at dinner.
Apparently in this video, Jordan Peterson destroys Sam Harris. I guess we're about to find out. Before we do that, please go down below and click like and subscribe, and please comment. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'm gonna reply and we're gonna have an awesome conversation. Let's do that, and we're gonna get going right now.
Fact that we do pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And that's not embarrassing. I mean,
okay, so what's the difference between, and I'm not trying to trap you here, I'm seriously not. So there might be mathematical intuitions, a prioris, let's say. Kant identified time and space as a priori intuitions.
Right.
But I think there's a third category of a priori intuitions that are in fact stories, or their personalities or stories. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to do a quick rereading of The Moral Landscape.
The Moral Landscape is Sam Harris's book that Sam Harris presents in these debates and that Jordan Peterson is partly responding to.
So because, see, you talk about G.E. Moore's argument of infinite regress. If you claim that something's good and you equate it with something, you can also ask infinitely why the thing you're equating it with is good. Now, it seems to me that the way that you step out of that argument, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is you tell a story. I'm not trying to be smart about that. You tell two stories. You tell a story about someone who has an absolutely terrible life. They're in a jungle where nature is trying to kill them all the time. And while they're trying to be killed by nature, while nature is trying to kill them all the time, horrible barbaric thugs are making their life miserable in every possible way. Okay, so that's one pole, let's say. And then another pole, you identify, and these are hypotheticals, so I guess they're fictions. That's one way of thinking about it, even though they're extracted from real situations. They're meta-fictions, they're meta-truths. That's another way of thinking about it. You contrast a good life, and that's a life where the person has enough to eat and enough shelter, and they have the things that you would expect people to want. You say this is a bad life, and you say this is a good life, and then you say that's. And then you make a side move, which I would say is that that's an objectively verifiable fact. I would say, I don't think it is an objectively verifiable fact. I think it's a fundamental moral claim. And I think that's where you put your stake in the ground. And I would say, when I read that, I thought, well, if you take your jungle story, which you've extracted from a bunch of horrors and compiled, and you take your positive story, which you've extracted from a bunch of horrors, or a bunch of quasi-utopias, let's say, and compiled, you're 2/3 of the way to a landscape of hell and heaven. Right? Well, so then why not continue the abstraction and say, look, what we're really trying to avoid here is hell.
Oh, yeah.
What we're really trying to move towards is heaven. Yeah, but as soon as you do that, you're in a religious landscape.
Okay. Did Jordan Peterson destroy Sam Harris here? I think this might be the key moment of all the debates between the two, although there are some valid criticisms of Jordan Peterson that have been brought up. So what's going on here is Sam Harris is concerned with science, and he's concerned with fundamentalist religious people. And in his attacks on them, in his book, he doesn't just say, we're going to get rid of the religious structure and there's no morality. He lays out a framework for a moral world that we could aim towards, something that can guide us in our way of being. And so what he says is, look, imagine this scenario. This is so bad, everyone would agree it's bad. And then imagine this scenario. It's a good scenario. It's so good, everyone would agree it's good. Therefore, it's a scientific, objective fact. So you see, Sam Harris is trying to build this moral framework off of something scientific, something objective, something outside of us. Now what Jordan Peterson is saying is, wait a second, that's a sidestep. That claim isn't a scientific claim. That claim is an axiomatic claim. Now an axiom is a fundamental assumption that you make about the world, or about an idea, or about a system, before you apply any logic or reasoning to it. So what we're seeing here is that Sam Harris has this moral framework, but the core of that moral framework isn't something scientific. And that's the thing. You have to start with a moral claim. You have to have an aim first before you can use science to help you get there. So you could say, science helped us get to the moon. Look what science did. It's so great. That's awesome. Now, the presupposition there is that it was good for us to go to the moon. And the ideas behind it being good for us to go to the moon aren't a scientific claim. It's a moral claim. You're operating in the world of morality, which is what religion is concerned with, to a certain extent. So let's keep going.
But my name for hell is... It's very interesting because, like, you and I were talking about this at dinner. We were talking about...
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
This at dinner and how the overlap or lack of overlap between our audiences. And so, like, I just heard from your audience there. And
you might have heard from the odd convert.
But what's amazing to me is, so, like, I have to do some work to figure out what point they think you made. Because
wait a second.
Wait, no. Hold on.
No. And I said if you're going to produce a fiction, why not go right to the end?
Okay,
because
so
you did produce a fiction.
You can tell stories by way of communicating certain ideas. I mean, that's obviously... I'm not saying stories aren't incredibly powerful and useful and inevitable, right? It's like
Wait, I think you are. You might not be saying that they're not inevitable, but you are debating their utility and power. Because you said that you don't need the story as an intermediary.
I'm not. So now we have a few doors open here, which I think we should we should extract the most out of these areas that we've touched and not run on to something else. So I think there's to talk about the utility of story, right? Which is obviously a fact about the world and about human psychology that you're reading a lot into and more into than I'm reading, right? And the people we just heard from love that you...
Well, maybe I'm reading more into it than you are. I'm not sure about that.
But you talk a lot about the primacy of stories, and you are trying to get me to admit that even I helplessly resort to storytelling to make my points, right?
Well, you did there.
I think this is a good place for us to, and I don't want us to get bogged down, but I think it's a good place for us to touch this topic of the distinction between literal and metaphorical truth, which you might want to introduce it, but because that in my mind that covers this different emphasis on stories.
Okay, briefly, but we are at 60 minutes, and we had agreed to go an hour and 15.
Okay, so that's going to be the end there, but I can add that last point here, what he was saying is the difference between the literal and the metaphorical. So I know what Sam Harris was going to say there. Jordan Peterson is painting this fictional story about heaven and hell and saying that it builds a moral framework that guides us in our life. Get away from hell and go towards heaven. He's saying it's useful, it's necessary, it's inevitable. Sam Harris actually agreed there that stories are useful, necessary, inevitable. I think what he would say is when you hear people say, it doesn't matter if you've been a bad person as long as you repent right at your deathbed, and actually repent, whatever that means, then you get to go to heaven after you die. Or if you don't, if you're just a helpless person and you happen to steal bread, then you're going to hell after you die. Now, Sam Harris is more concerned with people who make those literal claims about heaven and hell. Well, Jordan Peterson doesn't address that. That's not within his realm of these metaphorical narrative truths, these ideas that come out of culture and history. That's different than the idea of a literal heaven or hell. And I think that's the point they would actually agree on there. So it seems like there is that wasn't, on a second thought, that wasn't the crux of the entire issue, but it does highlight that one distinction, which is the most important one to be made, that there's a literal way of seeing things and there's a metaphorical way of seeing things. And you need to know what domain you're operating in. Thank you very much for watching. Please, I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. I'm going to reply to you. I'd love to have some awesome discussion down there. It would be really, really great if you could like and subscribe. That would really help grow the channel. Thank you very much. I'm going to be posting more. Thank you.